Good morning again. Boy, is got the pipes turned up high this morning, brother. Turn with me to Ephesians chapter 5. I would like to have us read. I'd like to read from there this morning. This is a passage that means a lot to me as I look at the whole aspect of technology. So much of what we have around us is not necessarily good or bad in itself, but it's how we use it. It's the control it has over us and the changes that it brings into our life. Are we okay with that? Are we using it in a way that's wise? And part of this chapter that speaks to me is that there is such a contrast between the ways of light and the ways of darkness. And that is what I want you to focus on as we look at this passage this morning. Think about that, how there is to be a difference the way we view these things and the way the world is going to view them. And I'm speaking of light versus darkness because I am making an assumption. I'm making an assumption this morning that we are all children of light, are we? And if that is true, we will respond to these things differently than the world. Amen? Okay, so as we read this, we're going to read the first 17 verses, and I'm going to read it here just because I know there's some people that don't have their scriptures, and we'll just read out loud so you can catch the essence of where we're going here. But pay attention to the contrast between the two sides. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 1. Therefore, be followers of God as dear children, and walk in love as Christ also hath loved us, and given himself for us an offering and a sacrifice to God for a sweet-smelling aroma. But fornication and all uncleanness or covetousness, let it not even be named among you, as is fitting for the saints. Neither filthiness, nor foolish talking, nor coarse jesting, which are not fitting, but rather the giving of thanks. For you know this, you know, that no fornicator, unclean person, nor covetous man who is an idolater has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. Therefore, do not be partakers with them. For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Walk as children of light. For the fruit of the Spirit is in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, proving what is acceptable to the Lord, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose or reprove them. For it is shameful even to speak of those things which are done by them in secret. But all things that are exposed or reproved are made manifest by the light, for whatever makes manifest is light. Therefore he says, awake you who sleep, arise from the dead, and Christ will give you light. See then that ye walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be unwise, but understand what the will of the Lord is. The key word that I see in this passage is light. God calls us to be children of light. And what fellowship does light have with darkness? We are called to be that light in the world. And I love the verse that says, for you were once darkness. Paul was writing this to the Ephesian church. Was it only meant for the Ephesian church, or does he mean that for us here today? And brothers and sisters, those of us who have named the name of Christ, do you remember what it was like to be in darkness? That's where we were. And that's where the devil wants to take us back to. And he says, you were once darkness, but you're not there anymore. You're children of light now. And that's your calling. That's the goal that you have, is to reach towards that. And he says, therefore, walk as children of light. Your walking is going to be different than it was before when you're walking in darkness. Your walking is going to exemplify something else. There is going to be a temptation for you to be drawn back towards the way of darkness. That is a given. But we dare not give in to those temptations. We must be aware of that and set our heart not to do that. So I got a question for you. How is light overcome by darkness? How does light overcome darkness? Last night, it was really dark in our little cottage, cabin, apartment, whatever. It was really dark in there. If I wanted to get rid of the darkness, is there any physical way to cut it up and hack it and throw it out the door? Can you remove darkness by force? No. The only way to remove darkness was by turning on the light. And as this world is getting darker and darker around us, God has called you and I to be that light. Does the world see that difference? Do they see us being willing to stand up on to be ill-used and taken advantage of, as the pictures we saw this morning? Do they see us being willing to be different and odd, out of step with society around us at times? Are we willing to be light? Because if we are the light of Christ, it will draw people to Him. Amen. But we have to be willing to let that shine. When we turn on the light, we allow the Lord to come into our lives. Sorry, I got ahead of my things. When we allow that, then I think this is the beautiful thing, and this is my goal for each one of us. That as we go from here, as we look at how we interact with the technology, how we interact with the world around us, that we walk as children of light. And we shine brightly to the world around us, that they say there's something different here. They're marching to the beat of a different drummer. That's my burden. But there's another verse that stood out to me as I was just reading it now again, this. Let no one deceive you with empty words, because for these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. I think I can speak wholeheartedly for Chester and myself. The power of what we share with you is not our persuasiveness, is not our charisma, is not the words with which we so entrench them into your souls. The power only comes when it's founded upon the Word of God. And so that's where he talked about meditating. It's so important. Most of what we catch here, I've listened to Chester's teachings probably about 6 times now. And by the way, if you ever go to Shepherd's Institute, if you're ever ordained, I encourage you to go. But you sit there and your brain hurts after 5 days of study from 7 in the morning till 9 at night. It is a long week. But I'll tell you what, I still need that reminder to me. Am I light? And I have to meditate on that, meditate on the words that's sharing. I just caught things this morning that I've seen. There's some of those slides probably half a dozen times now, but I just caught, that makes sense. And so meditate on them, think about them. So what I have to share today is I want each one of us and the church to turn on that light in the darkness around us. I want us to be able to reveal, to take a look at what that light reveals about us and where are we going and how are we using it. Because there's sometimes, if we just ignore something, that's basically in darkness, correct? If I really don't want to know, I remember one man saying to me, he said, well, I don't like doing a lot of Bible study because once I know it, then I'm responsible for it. Willful ignorance is another form of rebellion. Okay? And I'm praying that we would turn on the light and we look at what we see in the light of God's truth. So as I talked about yesterday, we're going to look at 6 different things that the Scriptures talk about that directly affect the way we view technology. We talked yesterday about technology is constantly changing. There's new things that are always coming in. The Bible doesn't always address those things specifically, but it does give us the principles that need to be put into practice. You can just say, yeah, you know what, I spend too much time on my phone. Okay, that's a good principle. Put it into practice. What does that look like? You can believe that all you want, but until you put it into practice, it doesn't change you. So I'd like to look at, what about our use of time? And I'd like to look at 2 verses, or 2 passages. In Psalms 39, verses 4 to 6, it says this: Lord, make me to know my end, and what is the measure of my days. If you don't know if you don't live in the reality that you're going to die someday, it doesn't really put in perspective what you're living for today. Someone said, until you know what you're ready to die for, you don't know what you're ready to live for. And I believe that's true. And that's what the psalmist is saying. Lord, make me to know what the end of my days and what is the measure of my days, that I may know how frail I am. Indeed, you have made my days as handbreadths. and my age is as nothing before you. Certainly every man at his best state is but a vapor. Selah. In other words, think about that. Every man at his best state is but a vapor. I look at these young men and young ladies playing volleyball, and my back hurts. You know, I used to be able to do that. I know you think that's impossible with as old as I am, but you know, that was where I was at, and I see the vitality and the energy, and you know, you're at your prime. Enjoy it. You know, it won't last. But the reality is that even though I'm probably 30 years older than some of you, I still remember so clearly what it was like back there. And it doesn't seem that long ago. When you're looking forward, everything looks so far ahead, but just look back. Look at the things that have happened in the last 2 or 3 years. How quickly has that gone by? There's some things that make things long. I get that. Trauma and stuff has to do that. But there is also that reality that life passes so quickly. And here we are. Then here's the last verses that says this. Surely every man walks about like a shadow. Surely they busy themselves in vain. He heaps up riches and does not know who will gather them. I work, as I said, primarily with older women at my store. The average age of my customers is about almost 70 years old now. It used to be, the average age of my customers was about 62. That was about 20 years ago. And as time has gone on, there's fewer and fewer sewers coming in. But I have customers that have spent over $65,000 in my store for toys. And I have been in their homes, and there's one home that I think of particularly right now that they had their insurance company required them to buy a fireproof safe for her jewelry when they leave home, because they're afraid if someone breaks into the house, that's going to be too easily accessible. And they said, we will not insure your $75,000 or $85,000 worth of jewelry, you know, if it's not locked up. And what's interesting is they have a bar downstairs, they have hot tubs, they have saunas, they have the biggest screen TV you can find. Like I said, she has 4 or 5 of my machines that I'd go there to service, and she can't remember how to use them because she doesn't use them often enough. She bought a Glowforge, the biggest, baddest laser etching machine that she had, and she used that thing for about 1.5 years, and it just sits there. They have all this stuff there. When I go into their home, there is no peace in that home. I despise going there. There is a tension between them. I actually came up to the door one time and overheard them effing each other out, and just the harsh language between the two. And you know, when you come up there, you're ready to knock on the door, and all of a sudden you hear these words. What do you do? And you knock on the door, and all of a sudden it gets quiet. And the door opens up. Oh, sorry, we're just having a little discussion. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's a discussion? I don't want to hear what a fight is like. And they made the comment to me one of the last times I was there. Our children are fighting now because they already are making, they want this, and they're writing us. We want you to make sure we get this when you die, and this when you die. And they said, we feel like we're vultures, that they're just picking at our bones already. Make me to know the end of my days. What's our end goal? How are we using our time? They retired early. He took retirement at 62. And he usually starts drinking by about 9:30 in the morning. And he's usually drunk most of the day. And she's struggling. This is a second marriage for both of them. Difficult situation. Psalms 90 verse 10 to 12 says this: the years of our life are 70, or if by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. You know, we are responsible for how we use our time. And I realize as I get older, I'm realizing how more precious that time is than I thought. Because I realize that what is behind me is more than what is ahead of me. And it doesn't feel like that far back there. Are we living with that end in sight? Are we living with that? As a child, I had a problem with procrastination. Don't do today what you can put off till tomorrow. It seemed like what my motto was. And there was times I came home from school. Chester would have really struggled having me as a student, because I would go home from school with more homework than I had gotten done in the day. And my father would have plans that he wanted to do things in the evening. And I said, I got to do homework. And he got a little frustrated with that. He says, hey, are you struggling? He talked to my teacher. Is he struggling at school? And she goes, no, he has problems with daydreaming. I built bridges over the ocean. I had cars that could fly. I had just amazing inventions that, I just didn't have money to build. And I would sit there for hours and hours on end. My teacher would read story time. That was great, and that was probably the most attention I paid. And my father struggled with that. One day, I developed a very keen skill of being able to balance on the rear legs of my chair with just barely the fingertips touching the desk. It was pretty good. My teacher was walking by, and she just put her hand on my shoulder. I don't think she intended to do that, but it changed my equilibrium enough that I went crashing on my back on the floor, and all of a sudden, all the heads turn around, and you're looking up at this sea of faces, and I just wanted to die. Maybe it would have been a fitting essence, looking up through the tomb, and there they all are looking at you, And my dad, and she said, maybe we should try paying attention a little bit more. And you know what? My schoolwork got all done that afternoon. And my father asked me, he says, what are you going to do when you stand in heaven someday? And God asks you, why did you waste so much time? Why did you waste so much time? And it's easy for me to look back at that young Japheth in 3rd grade and say, why did you do that? But what's Japheth doing today with his time? How are we using our time? Is technology helping us to redeem that time in ways that are wholesome, in ways that build wisdom? Or is technology causing us to waste more of it? Turn with me to Mark chapter 13. I want to read a few verses there, because this is something that I think really hit home to me in this. Mark chapter 13. Let me ask you a question. When Jesus spoke in parables, did he intend for us to be able to understand what he said? What do you think? Yes. Did he intend? Yes, there was something he wanted to communicate to us. And so I want you to look at this and say, where am I in this passage here, okay? Mark chapter 13, verse 33. Take heed, watch, and pray, for you do not know when the time is. And then here's where the parables start. It is like a man going to a far country who left his house and gave authority to his servants, to each to do his work, and commanded the doorkeeper to watch. So where are you in this passage? Where are you in this verse?
To every man his work.
To every man his work. I think that includes ladies. Okay? Has he given you something to do? Has he placed people in your sphere of influence that he wants you to spend time with? Parents, if that's us, that's definitely us, okay? God gave us children because he wanted them to teach us something, and he wanted us to teach them something. They say that children never grow up until they have their own kids, then their kids raise them. And there's an element of truth there, because we have something, a work that we're supposed to be doing, but I don't care if you're not even married yet. There are people that look up to you. There are people that are watching you that you have no idea of. And they're looking and saying, where are you going? How are you doing? And are we doing that work well? Verse 35, watch therefore, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming. In the evening, at midnight, at the crowing of the rooster, or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. And what I say to you, I say to all, watch. Jesus gave every one of us a work, a thing to do, and he gave us enough time to do it. And he also gave us a command. What are we supposed to do? In the verse, we have a work we're supposed to do, but what's the big command there that he says? Watch. Watch. I was curious. It was interesting listening to some of my children talk. they had some friends over and they were talking about how things happen at home. And this other family that was with us and my children were talking, and you find a lot of things out about your children when they're old enough that they're past that disciplinary stage, and you find out what happened that you should have known about back then. But do you guys remember when your parents first left you at home alone? Okay? Did they give you some things to do to occupy your time till they came home? You're allowed to do this or this, or if you don't know, you can go like this, Did they give you some things to do? You were free to roam and do whatever you wanted. Wow, okay.
Part of a big family, so they couldn't give work to everybody.
Oh.
The one time my parents left, they paid no rules.
Uh-huh.
And two of my brothers and I had this idea that if they come back and they say, well, did you turn the house upside down? So we thought we'd give them the opportunity to see the house upside down.
Okay.
So in the living room, we turned everything
upside down. Were they surprised?
We were surprised at how
And they made the comment about how that, their parents gave them a list of things to do. And they started out, as soon as they drove out the driveway, it was kind of like, yes, we can do it. And they said, well, one went to do their craft, one went to play out in there with their horses, one went to do this and that. And all of a sudden, 4 o'clock, Mom's going to be home about 4:30. All of a sudden, this list of things to be done, and there was, 10 pounds of flour that needed to go in a 5-pound sack. There was not enough time. You talk about a tornado that cleans. I mean, that's what was happening. They were doing all this stuff going, and all of a sudden, they see the car coming in the driveway, and they commissioned the favorite child to go out and distract Mom. And they're going out there and saying, "Oh, Mom, where'd you go? And what did you get?" And and while the rest of them are frantically trying to finish this stuff. What had happened? They hadn't watched. They were sleeping. When Jesus speaks of sleeping, it means not being alert and not being careless of that return. And my question is, as Christians today, are we awake or are we asleep? And does our technology cause our senses to be more awake and more cognizant of His return or less? I want you to think about that, because I can't draw a line right down here and say, here's where it's right, here's where it's wrong. But we know in our hearts, if we're open to hear God's Spirit, if we're willing to look at His light in our lives, we're going to be able to see that. And the other thing is this. When we go to sleep, the one who sleeps the best is the one whose work is done. If there's been some times when, I can't quite get my sermon to come together before I go to bed, and I've been wrestling with it, and finally, you know what? I'm tired. I need to finish this tomorrow morning, and I go to bed to get up the next morning. You know what? I don't sleep real well. And if you know as well as I do, if you got to get up at 2:30 in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning to go somewhere and do something, is your sleep restful? No, because you know there's something coming. And I think of the 10 virgins who are waiting for the wedding. I think 5 of those slept fine. And 5 of those woke up in a panic because they knew they weren't prepared. Are you and I using the time we have to prepare for the Lord's return? So, as I look at this, how does technology affect our use of our time? So I'd like to just look at this a little bit. This is not going to be in depth, but I just want to get you starting to think about this. What do you think the average age of social media integration is in our society? The average age.
You're talking all society?
All society.
5 years old, probably.
Okay. And when we're talking about social media, not necessarily technology exposed to screens. Okay. So where they're actually online interacting with other people on the World Wide Web.
12.
12?
10.
10 years old. Average age is 10 years old, okay? Do 10-year-olds have any sense of consciousness about really what is personal discipline and what is right or wrong? They're still figuring it out. Let me ask you this, what is the average daily time that people spend on social media? I found this through one of my advertising, by the way, because I advertise on the internet and I advertise through some of these venues, I have tools that those of you who don't advertise may not see, okay? So the average use of everyone who's on social media, and that we're talking about WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, that sort of thing, okay? What do you think the average time is?
12 hours.
Per day?
7, 8.
It's actually, you guys are high, and this is where I think my numbers are a little bit low, but they're saying that you average spend about a little better than 2 hours a day on social media, okay? Now, it's not necessarily all in one time, but I think it's more than that. And I'm going to say that from my own personal experience. I used to have Facebook up until about 4 years ago. I got rid of Facebook because of 2 reasons. I saw what it was doing to me in my personal life, and I saw how it was influencing my perception of truth. And I got rid of it. But I know what it's like to sit down after the children finally go to bed, or sometimes even sadly before they went to bed, and you start scrolling through your Facebook feed, and an hour and a half later, you look at the clock and where did that time go? Do you know what I'm talking about? If this is an accurate representation, and you know how many times you checked it during the day, right? We rarely sit down and we spend 2 hours in it. But you know how many times we check it during the day. If you add those things up, it makes a difference. In fact, if you want to know, just go to your phone. Your phone will tell you how much time you spend on these apps. It's amazing that the world has caught into this sometimes quicker than we do. They have apps out there for, it's called digital well-being, and they know what it's doing. But just like alcohol, they're not willing to cut it off. They're just simply saying, be responsible in your irresponsibility. Is in essence what they're saying. If you were to take 2.5 hours per day, at 18 hours per day, like let's say you're going to do social media for 18 hours a day. Over the course of your lifespan, if you live to be 65 years old, you started when you're 10, you're going to spend 7 years, 4 months, and 3 weeks of your life on nothing but social media.
What are you getting 18
Where
hours?
do you get 18 hours?
I'm just saying, if you take the total, take 2.5 hours a day, from 10 years old to 75.
Okay, Japheth, there's a typo on your thing. It says 18 hours per day. You mean per week?
No, hang on to me. Hang on with me. If I took this amount and added up all of that time over your entire life, and then I spent 18 hours a day, you got to sleep a little bit, okay? And I spent 18 hours a day, it would take me 7 years, 4 months, 3 weeks of your life to equal the amount that you spent over your entire life.
Okay, I get it now. Yeah.
Okay? I'm an 18-hour workday, okay? It would take you 7 years to use up all the social media. Let me picture it for you this way, a little differently. If you sleep 8 hours a day, this is how much of your life you spend sleeping. Buy a good mattress. That's what the mattress people say, you know. Okay? If you spend 9 hours a day in work, 8 hours a day in work. This is, oh yeah, because this is this is weekends included in here. Here you only work 5 days a week. You spend approximately 1/4 of your life in work. Social media is in here. Church, including every Wednesday night and every Sunday, 3 hours every Sunday morning, is there. Is that sobering? I think sometimes this is a spot we don't necessarily think. How much time am I spending when I'm spending the 5 minutes, the 10 minutes here? It adds up. What am I doing with that time? And I don't know about you, But I have learned that it's the little times that we waste the most that God wants to meet with us. Can I just be blunt, and I hope this isn't crude? When you go to the bathroom, what do you sit and do? Do you think? Do you pray? Or do you get out your phone? You know, it's amazing. There's been so many times, there's quiet times in the checkout when you're kind of bored because that person up front asked for a price correction. And so there's two, we pull out our phone. What if God wanted me to interact with other people around me? What if God puts the person right in front of me in the line because they knew they needed a word of encouragement, but I was sleeping spiritually? Bear for you, this is a picture of a clock, and on the clock it has all the pictures of all the different icons from Facebook, Twitter, everything else, YouTube. And it says this: one of the great uses of Twitter and Facebook will be to prove at the last day that prayerlessness was not from a lack of time. A quote from John Piper. How many of us would say we need more prayer time? We have prayer time. Are we redeeming the time? Or is technology taking us away from that? I must move on here a little bit. The second thing was, what does the Bible have to say about our desire for an easy life? Let me ask you this. Is it wrong to desire to make things go a little easier?
Because you need help. Depends.
It depends.
What are you going to do with that extra time?
Okay, what you going to do with that extra time? I think pleasure and the easy life was meant to be the byproduct of righteous living, not the end in itself. And that's a huge difference. If you look at the world today, they say it's all about what you do on the weekend. It's all about what you get to do when you retire. And so you discipline yourself simply so you can do what is easy. The goal is the easy life. And there's all sorts of advertisements that go to it. Your best life now. YOLO. You only live once. So make the most of it now. All of these things are designed to try and say, take the easy road. And when pleasure becomes a goal, it always leads to sin and chains. Always. When pleasure becomes what we live for, that will eventually become our chains because we won't do the difficult thing. And you know, just, this isn't my notes, so I won't charge you extra, but do you realize that our national debt is so high that in 3 years, half of our GDP, our gross domestic product, is going to be taken just to pay the interest? What kind of home could run on that? You take half of your income, Jesse, and use it simply to pay the interest on your home. No principal, just the interest. Could you survive? There isn't a financial plan that would be able to do that. But we don't have anybody, we don't have enough of people in this country that are willing to say, hey, I'm willing to do the hard thing and vote for someone who's going to make things more difficult so we can survive. They're not willing to do it. What did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 7? He said, I set before you two ways. One way is going to be easy, and one way is going to be difficult. He says straight, but it's actually difficult. Now, which way, if you just saw just those gates, which one would we be prone to choose? The easy way. Why do the hard thing? But Jesus also gave us the key. He says, I'm going to tell you what's at the far end. And so are we willing to do sometimes the more difficult thing for the end result rather than for the immediate gratification? Technology is designed to make life easier. You know, I made I told the story about the washing machine yesterday. You know what? I would feel really terrible making my wife go out and do our laundry. Hey, so you know what? We're going to make life more difficult for you because we need to just make life difficult. We're going to take the washer and you're going to do all the laundry. Actually, Lynn and Violet do all the laundry by hand. You know, I don't think there would be a lot of joy in that statement. Is it wrong to have a washing machine? No, I don't think so. I don't think there's necessarily wrong, but is there a danger in pursuing that? Because the reality is that there's so much stuff out there that is designed to simply fluff our nests that it becomes our taskmaster instead of our blessing. There's a little ditty. It seems to me, the more you have to take care of the things you have. And it's true. There is a danger in pursuing that. And what are the dangers in pursuing? I'd like to just talk about that a little bit. What are the dangers in pursuing pleasure that you see? I'm getting ahead a little bit. I'm ahead of my notes because I'm not following as closely.
It's about me. I become my own God.
Okay? It's about me. I become my own God. You know what? If it feels good to me, it's good. If it feels bad to me, it's bad. Run that through the filter of Scripture and see if that comes out the same way. It's going to be directly opposed to that. I think when we start pursuing the easy life, we will start to focus on life here instead of the hereafter. It's easy because now all of a sudden it's about what's pleasurable to me here rather than what's going to be beneficial to me later. And that's one of the things that, that I think is one of the marks of a godly man is when he's willing to wait for the latter reward, God's reward. Because we look at the moral decadence that's in our society and what's the big push for that is you need this now. And God says, it's better if you wait. Correct? And what does Satan say? You only live life once. And God says, no, there's a life that comes after that's even better. Which one are we living for? Which one are we going for? Where is our focus? Is our focus on the hereafter? The other thing is absorbing earth's profits for oneself. This is a whole other thing. I was asked to share a message in Lancaster County, PA, on the surgical line between wealth and lifestyle. Oh boy, where do you draw that line? I didn't draw the line, that's a different story. But the question is, as we earn more and more money, we can find lots more things to spend it on if our focus is on here. But Jesus said we're supposed to lay up our treasures in heaven. How do you lay up treasures in heaven when you have $2 million in your bank account? Give it all away? No. Jesus said, or Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13, he said, though I give all my goods to feed the poor, and I would give my body to be burned, and yet have not love. And he's referring there to Christ's love. It profits me nothing. It means that you have no treasure in heaven just because you gave it all away. Your treasure in heaven comes from doing what the Heavenly Father prompts us to do. And when we take our eyes off of Him and we start focusing on my stuff, we so often don't hear His voice touching that and calling us to something else. Another issue is pride. Did I tell the story about the 2 cars when I went to the rental agency? One of the things about getting old is that people treat you differently, and sometimes that's nice, sometimes it's not. I actually took my children all for ice cream out last year to Culver's, and they gave me 1 senior discount. I think they thought Grandpa was taking all his children out for ice cream. But when I went out to Salt Lake City, I got there, landed late in the day, and I went up to the rental agency, and they said, oh, I'm sorry, we're all out of the cars that you had requested, but all we have is just this little Buick SUV, or we have a Dodge Challenger with a Hemi. Which one would you take? The temptation was definitely there, Sammy. It was definitely there. Why? Why would we choose one over the other? Let me ask you, what is the purpose of a car to a Christian?
Transport from point A to point B.
Okay, transportation.
Sure.
What's that?
Economy.
Economy. Okay.
Get there quickly.
Get there. Time management. Yeah, how we spend our time, right? We were just talking about that. I mean, sitting with those little, red, white, and blues or behind you is not necessarily good time management either, or a good testimony.
Opportunity knocking.
Yeah. All of a sudden, the temptation was there. But I started thinking about this later, more so, as I thought about what this is. Why would I value one over the other? Is it not because of the value system of the world around me? And one of my friends asked me, he says, well, what about if you were a place where no one would see you? And you could just drive it out there. Would it be wrong to feel the roar? And I said, okay, but who are you going to tell? Ooh, you had to bring that up, didn't you? How much of this drives us when our focus is on here and now? How many of you guys, if you had your choice between that and a minivan, would choose the minivan? I had one man that day, he says, I'm not going to drive a Goobermobile, and he was not going to drive a minivan. And he couldn't hardly pack all of his children into his vehicle, but he wasn't going to stoop that low. Why? I used to have a bus, and my wife forbade me, but I was going to cut out letters. Guys, you see on the back of the truck, real men drive a truck. I was going to put in that real men drive a bus, but she said, no, I can't do that. I think another danger is that we have lazy lifestyles. What do we do? When our focus is on the easy life here, it's easy for us to take our foot off the throttle when it comes to serving God. It takes work to go serve at the soup kitchen. It takes work to get out of our homes and go do something else. It takes work to invite the public into our homes. Where is our vision? What's our end goal? If our goal is simply about the pleasures of life here, then we will end up becoming controlled by that. If you read Ezekiel, I'm not sure why this didn't show up on here. Ezekiel 16:49, what were the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah? We all know that Sodom and Gomorrah is underneath the Dead Sea, correct? What were the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah? Tell me quickly.
Pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of violence.
Okay. I didn't hear you say anything in there about homosexuality.
I think that's what Ezekiel says.
That's exactly what. All the years after Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, what does God say that their root sins were that led them into that debauchery? Abundance, fullness of bread. They had way more to eat. By the way, you just simply go through town and you find out the abundance of bread when there's 32 different fast food places you can stop and get food. You go to the grocery store and there's food to no end. We do not have to work like over in Thailand. I remember
10 coffee places.
What's that?
10 coffee places. 10
coffee places in Bemidji. We were just talking about that this morning. They're just building another Starbucks right into another drive-through Starbucks, so more people can go through there and spend $7 a cup for burnt coffee. Okay, and my question is, the sins of Sodom were, first of all, it was pride. We're going to make Sodom great again. Does that sound familiar?
Make America great.
Yes, you're right, Bear. There's someone saying that. We're going to do that. By the way, do you know that's exactly what Hitler was saying to the Germans? I am going to make Germany a sovereign nation. We are going to be a nation that's going to shine to the world, and we're going to be greater than everybody else. It's pride. Okay? Fullness of bread, I talked about that, and abundance of idleness. What drives most workers? It's not the product they put out. It's the paycheck they receive and the weekend. It's the time off. They're looking for that. I'm not saying it's wrong to look forward to doing things on the weekend, but if that's the whole reason we're going to work, then brothers and sisters, we're missing one of the biggest purposes God has created work for. To glorify Him in everything we do. And the third was ignoring the plight of the poor around them. These were the sins of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now my question, do you see that in America? Absolutely. And it comes from the desire from our easy life. What are we going to do? In closing, I'd like to, I'm not going to necessarily have you read this whole passage, but in 1 Kings chapter 12 is a unique story. I'm just going to turn here because I want to read these verses to you. 1 Kings chapter 12, Jeroboam and Rehoboam had just torn the kingdom of Israel apart. Well, actually, you know the story. It had just separated. And Jeroboam now has a problem. Because he recognizes that all the people in the 10 northern kingdoms still are required by God's law to go worship in Jerusalem 3 times a year. And he knows this key fact that we forget, that wherever you worship, your heart will be turned towards. Wherever you worship, that's where your heart will be focused towards. And so Jeroboam knows, he says, I got this problem. If they keep going back to Jerusalem, eventually their heart's going to return towards the king there, and I'm going to lose the top foot of my body. I'm going to lose my head. So he had to figure out a way of how to keep all the people from going to Jerusalem. Now, the other side of the story is, well, you could just say, well, don't go. Just come up with something different. But there's a problem. Jerusalem was where Solomon had lived. The temple was built there. And Solomon was so wealthy that it said that silver became like stones in Jerusalem. There was so much gold and silver that it became like stones. It was not necessarily worthless, but it was kind of like, oh, you got some silver. Fine, There was so much glory in Jerusalem. And now Jeroboam's up here. He's a new king. He doesn't have all the years of taxes, and he's got to try and figure out some way to keep the people here. How do you compete with the glory and the gold of Jerusalem? There's only one thing he could do. And so he built 2 golden calves. And he knew they didn't have Amtrak, they didn't have cars, they didn't even have 4-wheelers. They had donkeys and feet, and that they had to walk. And sometimes it was a 2 or 3 day journey to walk to Jerusalem. And men, you were required to be there 3 times a year. It's a long journey. So what he did is he made these 2 golden calves, and he put them right next to them. And he made the comment, he says, it's too hard for you to go the whole way to Jerusalem. Here are the gods that brought you out of the land of Egypt. You can worship them here, where it's much more convenient for you. And that's a question. It just blows my mind. All of those people in the northern kingdom, they knew what the glory and the gold in Jerusalem was like. They'd been there. They'd seen it. And they had a choice now. Am I going to make the difficult journey down to where I know God is? Or am I going to accept this convenient replacement here? And they chose the replacement. They deliberately, that generation who knew of God, and they'd seen Solomon in all his glory, and all the glory of the temple, they chose to turn their back on the true God for the convenience of something close by. And that nation never recovered. Their children grew up without knowing that. Their children grew up without seeing that lived out, of going to Jerusalem, seeing the dedication that God called them, the holy living that God called them to. Their children never saw that. And it never recovered. They never had a godly king, and they went into captivity decades before the Southern Kingdom did. And why do I share that story? I share it because I think we're living in the exact same scenario today. You know, God has created marriage. He's created the love children have for their parents. He's created all these things that are beautiful and glorious. And Satan knows that there's no way he can compete with the fulfillment of walking in God's path and doing God's ways, the joy and fulfillment that he brings in life. He can't compete with that. The only thing he can do is give us a convenient replacement that's right at hand. And I'm going to be candid with you. I'm asking you to be candid and be honest with yourself. But do you know how easy it is for me when I come home after working all day and trying to figure out problems and because that's all I do. I help the staff, and the staff gets the victories. I just work behind the scenes and make sure that they have the stuff they need to get it done. It's not very rewarding sometimes to be a business owner. And I come home, and my little girls come running to me. And they know, they haven't seen Papa all day. And they say, Papa, can you read me a story? And they hold up that Amelia Bedelia book, which I despise. I have a choice. I can either be building the golden, glorious relationship with my daughter that will carry her through into her adulthood in security and safety, or I can accept the convenient. No, not right now. Papa's got to have a little me time. And I pull out my phone. Do you know what I'm saying? Husbands, boyfriends. It's hard sometimes working through relationships inside a marriage. And Satan knows that there's a glory in the marriage between a man and a woman that God put there. And it is so glorious, God actually uses that union to try and exemplify his love for the church. And anything that reflects God, Satan will seek to do what he can to destroy. And there's nothing Satan can do to compete with that, but he says, you know what, it's too hard to try and put all this effort into one woman. Here, let me give you an app that'll make you feel better. Let me give you something that's easy. And we sow the seeds that destroy our souls, not because we don't know, but because it's convenient. Brothers and sisters, the allure of the easy life is the question. There is the allure of the easy life is what turns our hearts away from God. I'd like to ask you this. I want you to think about this. I don't have homework for you, but I want you to meditate this in your quiet time this afternoon. Are you choosing text conveniences over God's intended glory? Are you using your time, or how is the technology in your life affecting God's relationship? Thank you.